Okay. Hey, Rod, how's it going?
Hi, it's Rod at ListenLoop.
How are you?
Good. Is this just between us, or is this open to everybody?
Nope, we're open to everyone. Just wanted to make sure we're all good in terms of audio here. So we're going to get started in a few minutes.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
Yep. My desk broke, so if you can imagine, I'm actually on my floor right now with my computer. So perfect timing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. So thanks for joining us. The topic we're chatting about is how to unlock hidden revenue in your CRM system. So I'm Christina. I work at marketing here at Leadfeeder. I'm a former HubSpot partner, digital marketing consultant, and a former sales director. We have a distributed team here at Leadfeeder, so I live in San Diego. Rod is joining as well from ListenLoop. So Rod, if you want to give just a little bit of a intro to yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Rod Fuentes, co-founder and CEO of ListenLoop. And ListenLoop is an account-based advertising software company that delivers banner ads to specific target accounts and job titles using some of our proprietary ad technology. Very much a product person, former engineer, an entrepreneur now, formerly have led SaaS and e-commerce startups. And I think a lot of my friends laugh at my love of Excel spreadsheets and data mining software. So if I get too techy and into the weeds of data, just hit me a chat and say, hey, slow down.
Awesome. All right. So a sales funnel in its basic version is leads go in at the top and then few convert to business opportunities. About 73% of leads aren't ready to buy today, and there's obviously huge fluctuations with this percentage depending on sales team performance, industry, location, type of business. But essentially the problem is that a good chunk of leads don't end up as new revenue. So this chart right here really depicts about what a standard conversion opportunity pipeline looks like. About 22% of self-qualified leads turn into new business, and this is a typical opportunity stage pipeline for most B2B sales organizations. So then what happens? There's usually a few options. Leads go cold, 2, they get pushed back to marketing, or 3, sales sets activities to follow up at a given point in time. So in my experience, most sales teams do cherry pick and don't set future activities to manage the pipeline. So then usually the outcome is leads go cold. I put a lot of these lead recovery efforts on marketing because in many organizations, marketing is way too focused on filling the top of the pipeline versus recovering leads that get lost somewhere along the way. So they really need to own the lead generation all the way through. And I thought this depicted a sales funnel, much more accurately. There's exit points in most sales pipelines, but a lot of leads do leak out during the handoff from marketing to sales, mainly because marketing hands off leads too prematurely. So I actually just finished a blog post for Leadfeeder where we talked about lead management process, and I interviewed companies like Lead Genius and Socito, which are other B2B sales tools, to find out more about their best practices. And something that stood out to me was the importance of having a shared business goal. And in many cases, that business goal is revenue. So when revenue is shared, when revenue is a shared business goal between sales and marketing teams, there's more emphasis on marketing to hand off to sales only qualified leads, or for marketing to focus more on marketing channels that drive paid customers versus simple lead generation. And also more incentive for marketing to recover the 78% or so of leads that get handed off to sales that don't convert to new business. Want to pause right here for a second. Okay, yeah, we've had this issue before with audio, so I apologize. Usually it's on your side. If you guys can't hear, it's an audio function. If you can enable that, you should be able to hear me just fine. So yeah, so apologies for that. But so yeah, so when marketing is a shared business goal between teams, there's more emphasis to hand off qualified leads from marketing, and so really more incentive for marketing to recover the 78% or so of leads that get handed off to sales that don't convert to new business. So in reality, all this is really missed revenue opportunity for the organization, and recovering leads at various stages of the sales pipeline becomes this big opportunity. So where can you find this missed revenue opportunity in your CRM? In marketing, we refer to leads that did not close as closed lost, which with no other status field. So in the past, I've created a custom status field in Salesforce and also in Dynamics, and this option is available in most CRMs. That would be a drop-down status for a lead or for a company record. So for sales to choose this lead status, such as return to marketing, notifying marketing that these are to be returned, this is one of the easier ways to rebound leads directly from CRM is with this, quote-unquote custom created status field that notifies marketing when leads are to be returned for future remarketing. And in Salesforce, it looks something like this. So I drop down a list state and I choose my list state to be returned to marketing. So this is really the first step in making sure there's a handoff for future marketing, such as when the lead is lost today, but there is still future revenue opportunity. So what is a possible recovery strategy and how does it work? So there are a few simple methods of rebound, and these are just a few. So recovery tactic number one, using a marketing automation tool that has a bidirectional sync with CRM. So, I mean, the CRM market is $36 billion globally, and marketing automation software is about $5 billion. So these are really, categories that have a large footprint. So there's a good likelihood if you have a CRM and marketing automation tool that this type of native integration is quite possibly available for you already. But when a lead status field changes, it gets automatically pushed back to marketing and added to a list, for instance. And so this is just a screenshot of what it could look like within HubSpot and sending leads back and forth from HubSpot to Salesforce. You can also use an app exchange like SyncApps or Zapier. So it's not terribly difficult to set up in terms of getting contact records or leads from one app to another using any one of these app exchanges. We actually use Zapier all the time for multiple tools, and it's pretty simple to get the data you need from one app to another. And then finally, the most basic version of lead recovery or lead rebounding, if all else fails, is to export leads to a CSV file and then share it in Google Sheets or Google Doc or even Dropbox, somewhere where there's joint access between teams to understand what leads need to be recovered and then remarketed to or retargeted. And then I think now Rod is going to actually go through some more specifics about what you can do with these recovered leads.
Thank you, Christina. And that's a great place to start. I want to focus on tactical ideas and channels for how B2B marketers can implement their recovery programs. And I'm going to outline a few ideas here that I've picked up from working with about 200 different B2B marketing organizations and how they handle their recovery programs. I want this to essentially get your gears turning and think about ideas that you'll be able to implement in your company. So number one, you have to nurture, right? Everyone knows this. The thing is, we need to make sure that you're actually doing. Christina talked about how we can get status change, get the leads, export them out, put them into MailChimp or your favorite email marketing program, and And that's definitely a key part of any recovery program, being able to use email as the backbone communication channel to stay on top of your leads. Now, for us here at ListenLoop, we're using Autopilot to create a 14-step master journey that essentially uses a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 pieces of educational content, and then perhaps 1 request to reconnect as part of that recovery process. Right? We don't want to be heavy-handed. We just want to let them know that, hey, we're still around and we still think that there's a fit or an opportunity. Now, if you have the resources, you should make different journeys or tracks of email marketing that are tailored to the fact that this lead has already been in your sales funnel. Your salespeople have already had a discovery call with them. They've identified the BANT. They've identified perhaps specific challenger sale problems that can be addressed with your solution. And to the extent that you can provide a drip campaign that is tailored to that, obviously all the better, right? You shouldn't talk to them as if this is the first time that they're entering the funnel, because it's not. And I think that if you have that resource and capability, it definitely behooves you to go down that path. Now, in keeping with nurture, we've talked about one step, which is email. A second step, of course, is your phone call setup. Phone call can be a bit tricky. You can't be too heavy-handed. In an initial outbound campaign, perhaps we're all accustomed to doing a sort of 2 emails, 1 phone call cadence, and that's great for that tip of the spear. But on the recovery programs, I'm hearing that once a quarter might even be enough, and that just goes a bit above and beyond where most people are reaching out in these recovery programs. And I think what's great about this is that even if you don't talk to the lead at the account you're going after, just the fact that you left a voicemail serves as an advertisement of sort. Excuse me. Think of a Spotify audio ad for that one customer. You leave them a voicemail, you're going to tell them about who you are, what you do, why it's relevant, and that will create an auditory recall effect that ultimately lifts the value of your brand, reminds them of your offering, and perhaps rekindles a conversation. So I know Christina and I had just spoken about different tactics and different tips and ideas for implementing a campaign like that. And Christina, if you can go to the next slide, the ABM playbook that we co-authored with DiscoverOrg has a lot of these different cadences and real tactical ideas that I welcome you to check out. But so we've talked about email, we've talked about phone call. Let's talk about advertising. This is, I think, one thing that marketers tend to forget. And it's not that they forget advertising, it's that they forget that advertising can be a powerful channel for nurturing. Most of us think of ads as, again, the tip of the spear, demand gen, getting more leads. But I think there's an opportunity for people to rethink what display ads can do. So if you think about a lost lead, they've heard about you to some extent already. They've spoken to your salespeople. Perhaps they didn't have the opportunity to buy your product 6 months ago, but that doesn't mean we don't want to stay top of mind, especially if they're on a cycle where they couldn't buy because perhaps they were already committed to a competitor on another contract. So in this context, advertising could be used to nurture out content, stay top of mind with that particular lead in a really light-handed, omnipresent way, so that it's not, hey, just following up emails, right? Ping, bump, how's everything going over there? We all know that those can be a bit tiresome at times. And so using ads as an alternative channel to stay top of mind is really powerful. Now, one of the other areas that is ripe for usage in a recovery campaign is direct mail. Christina, if you can go back one slide here. The direct mail is something that is making a bit of a comeback among account-based marketing practitioners. Recently I've heard of clients delivering a pizza with a cardboard top that says, hey, lunch is on us, give us a call, the client, right? You can go as simple as a postcard. You can go big and deliver a Kindle with a preloaded ebook. And perhaps even the BDR includes a note that says, call the sales rep to give you the unlock code, right? Kind of holding it hostage a little bit to force the engagement if it's a really high level, perhaps C-level prospect. So Direct mail is an excellent recovery channel, but with a caveat, right? I want to encourage some caution here. Your team, to some extent, has already given best efforts to close the account the first time around. So depending on the circumstances, you may or may not want to spend a lot of money per lead on a resource-intensive direct mail campaign. So what you want to consider are these two criteria here. First of all, think about your average sale price and make sure it's high enough to support what can be often an expensive direct mail campaign. Just imagine sending Kindles to, the C-level suite for 100 accounts, right? It'll add up. And second, if your direct mail campaign is strictly a recovery play, then you might want to trend towards the low-cost tactics like postcards, FedEx packages that require signature, so that you're delivering 80% of the value of the direct mail without the larger cost involved. So, what we've covered so far are 4 different channels, some tactical ideas that you can implement for a recovery program. And the question that always comes up is, well, that's great, but how do I measure the recovery program? What are metrics that I can use to understand its performance? And at the end of the day, this really depends on how your sales force is set up and whether your sales team closes out opportunities on an account. There's essentially 2 flavors of this. One is, hey, the opportunity is not lost so much as it's been returned to marketing, and we'll pick it up again. And there are other teams who will properly or kind of officially close out an opportunity only to open a new one with a new amount and close date estimate once the lead has rekindled. So either way you do it is fine. The question just becomes how you measure it. And what the metrics that I've seen companies use are things like sales velocity tends to be the most important one. I think everyone agrees that they want faster deals, right? Because for the most part, this recovered lead should be fairly educated and warmed up already. So what you want to see is that the deal velocity for your recovery campaign is a lot faster. Now, why do we care about that? Well, we care about that because at the end of the day, marketing efficiency, sales efficiency is really important. If you can generate more dollars using less marketing and sales resources, and by resources I'm referring to people, human capital, their time, then you'll be better off. You'll be a much better organization. You'll produce more revenue per head count. And who doesn't love that? Now, the other things that you're going to want to measure are, how about the deal sizes? If you can go back one slide here, second criteria, the deal sizes. I've seen companies who focus on this as a metric because they understand that when a customer is already familiar with the product, they've already been taken down the funnel to some extent, the fact that they're coming back and speaking with sales again indicates that there is a strong value your company is offering, and as a result, gives the salesperson on the second bite at the apple an opportunity to pitch it in a way that ultimately generates more dollars for that company. Now, the last metric of success here is looking at the conversion rates down the funnel. Here, what you want to be measuring is looking at the recovery campaign prospects and accounts and seeing that the flow down the funnel is much higher, right? The fact that this person has recovered and come back into the funnel should indicate that they're going to go down the funnel faster or at a higher rate. So that's something you're going to want to be measuring as well. Look, at the end of the day, the bottom line here is that you want to see how much pipeline value was created from these recovered lead campaigns. And you should track this from a Salesforce campaign object, or as Christina showed us earlier, a custom field object, so that you know that this was an opportunity sourced from the recovery campaign. And ultimately, that's what's going to give you the confidence that this extra effort is going to be worth the squeeze and the campaign setup. So we can go to the next slide. One of the things that we've been kind of talking about is these different 4 channels and how you want to communicate. What I want to turn to is this idea of content. Content is king, they say, and it certainly has been my experience with working with clients in account-based marketing campaigns that it's constantly important to define the message and position that you want to take for the segment of account that you're targeting in your recovery program. One of the things that we hear often is, hey, I'm targeting these 100 accounts in my recovery program, and 3 months later they'll look at the results and they'll say, well, these didn't perform necessarily any better than my typical campaign. And the first question you have to ask them is, okay, well, did you customize the content in any way to acknowledge the fact that they're not just your typical top of funnel lead? And that's usually the eye opener. And they say, oh, well, no, I just targeted them because I really wanted to go after that account, or because they've been down the funnel before, so I thought that would work. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be better, right? If you can customize your content, segment it down to the accounts you want to go after, or in this case, the recovery accounts, all the better. And I know that takes effort and time, but if it translates to an outsized return in deals, especially with larger enterprise type accounts, then it's all worth it in the end. If we can go to the next slide, Christina. I think the most sophisticated marketers today that use marketing automation generally have 3 stages, right? We've got your tofu, mofu, bofu, which is essentially your top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. And the content you want to produce for each of these different stages is going to be different. At the top, you're going to be focusing on brand awareness. Now, consider how that might change for a recovery program. In the middle, you're going to be talking about education, right? This is your webinars, your ebooks and white papers. And at the bottom of the funnel, your content is going to be focused on creating trust and credibility that will ultimately lead to the closing of a deal. So now ponder for a moment, how can these recovery programs slightly alter the content for each of these stages, right? Your education might be a little different. You might want to skip a lot of the ebooks because they're already educated on that stage, right? Your brand awareness might change as well. It's not going to be high-level position statement. It might even just be extremely graphical just to get the logo back in front of them, whether it's by email, advertising, direct mail campaigns. It's just something, a touch point to get them to make that visual connection. Leads that are in a recovery program need 2 things. You can go to the next slide, Christina. One thing that you need to do is build out what I've heard called the 9 box. There's a buyer in the center, and you've got detractors and promoters inside of this organization, and you got to build out all the stakeholders within the target account. And so part of your recovery program is going to go beyond just targeting the one lead that's in your CRM, right? If you're doing it correctly and the best you can, you're going to target that person, but you're also going to target their direct up reports, their subordinates, and you're going to get other people involved in the buying process because that may have been what held up the deal in the first place, right? And the second thing they're going to need is convincing. They're going to have to convince the other stakeholders that your product, your solution is the one that's going to solve their problems. And that's going to happen in your recovery program through some of these 4 channels that I've described, right? So if you've been thinking about recovery so far in the context of, hey, we're just going to hit this same lead with more or less the same content we've had in the past because it's easy to do, I encourage you to think again and really focus on what content you want to serve and how that's going to be different and how you're going to expand the coverage that you have in terms of accounts, in terms of contacts at a given account that you're trying to recover. If we can go to the next slide. So to give you just a concrete idea of the different stages of content that we're describing, I've listed out a couple of different ad units from some of our clients, and this will give you just a quick hint at this. On the far left, we've got a tofu campaign, very much brand awareness. One thing you'll take away from this is that the first ad on the left from Engagio doesn't even have a call to action. It really is brand awareness. That's what they're shooting for. And what they're looking to do is drive an increase in engagement from their target accounts that they want to talk to. Now, moving into the middle ad, you've got a MOFU type content. Here you've got your white paper, right? And it has a call to action. It's strong, and it really is driving an opportunity to re-engage in a conversation. And on the far right, you've got a BOFU renewal campaign from Acton. Right, and here the idea is target accounts are going to come up for renewal for software, and we need to reconnect with these folks so that we can have a good conversation leading up to that renewal And this one, to me, really reminds me of that recovery program, right? They're being very sensitive to the fact that the leads that they're going after with this ad are already engaged in some way. They're not treating them like just any lead. They're treating them with the deference and relevancy that they deserve, given that they're already customers or, quote unquote, in the funnel in some way, and hitting them again with content that's very relevant to them. So let's go to the next ad here. The next content. Yes, the next one, the don't gate, deliver value. So one of the things, because we focus on advertising at ListenLoop, one of the takeaways I want you to consider is the question about gating or not gating content. It's one that we get a lot. And I want to frame it in the context of this recovery program. So generally speaking, people will gate content for two primary reasons. Number one, you want to get contact information for people you want to call and book a demo with. And number two, you want to get some kind of signal that there is engagement from that lead. And so in a recovery program, because you already have contact information, that value proposition tends to go out the window. And really, you have to make a decision between, do I gate this just to get an idea for their engagement and signal? Or do I want to just deliver value, give them the content that they're seeking, and earn their trust and credibility that way? At the end of the day, you're going to know your buyer better than I could possibly know right now, sitting in my own office. But I would encourage you to consider a scenario where you deliver value without gating content in your recovery programs. A lot of the marketing automation programs out there, like HubSpot, Marketo, Acton, and so forth, already cookie your lead and when they submit the form the first time. So even if they come back and you give them a new piece of content, the marketing automation software will let you know that they did in fact engage again. So for 80% of the cases out there, you're still going to get that value for the ungated content. So that's something you should definitely consider. Let's go to the next slide here, Christina. So that's it for me. The things I want to make sure you remember are the 4 channels that you have at your disposal, the cadences you're going to want to set up to orchestrate those 4 different channels for your lead recovery program. And I want you to really think about the content you're going to create for these channels and how that's different or unique, given that you know that this is a recovery program. Right? And if you do those things well, I think you'll reap a lot of the benefits that Christina talked about at the beginning, where less effort will produce more revenue for your company.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Rod. I think there's a lot of good insights here in terms of, once companies and organizations identify, what part of the sales funnel or sales pipeline leads are leaking out, and those recovery tactics that could, really, drive new revenue after the lead is captured. So rebounding recovery is an important process, an important part of lead generation. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to some questions here. Typically, we take these by chat. So if you have any questions, go ahead and chat them in, and Rod and I will go through those. Give it a few minutes and see if anyone has questions.
Well, while people type some up, Christina, I'll ask you a question. I think it's really unique that you're a former sales director now on the marketing side, and one of the things that I was curious about was, as a quota-carrying salesperson, what was that like to see leads leaking out of the funnel, and what did that recovery process look like for you at previous organizations?
So in sales, it looked specifically like that quasi sales funnel I showed, where really sales is really cares more about leads that are ready to buy today or in the very near term. So our focus was on that short-term, KPI goal of new business and meeting our numbers, versus leads that were potentially interested months or years out. And so really the blame game starts, when it comes to, well, these leads aren't, in my pipeline in the foreseeable future, therefore I'm just going to leave them here for someone else to recover. So it's interesting, when you're in sales, you kind of, see things from a different perspective than when you're in marketing. But I think to be a successful part of in my perspective, at least, being a successful marketer is to understand the sales perspective. And so I carry my sales perspective into marketing, and then I can, better understand what sales objectives are, and then, tie that back into marketing performance. So it's really about, getting clarity and receiving information and sending information, between teams as to what's important to those teams versus what's important to you as the individual. So as a sales director, it's really about understanding, sales performance, the immediate benefit of sales performance, and then working as closely and as lockstep as possible with marketing to see, that leads that aren't within the pipeline currently for your sales team members are getting recovered by, someone within marketing to do some retargeting or to do some remarketing, as you suggested with the tactics. But I always, made it a point to, at least with my reps, to ask about pipeline. And so they would always have, pipeline performance numbers, not just immediate, closing new business. It's about making sure activities and tasks are being set and followed up on when a lead is actually an opportunity, a sales opportunity. So it's a kind of a quasi, shade of gray, but it's really about pulling teams together and making sure that both teams, have the same type of objective as, discussed works well when it's revenue. Both teams are driving revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sales alignment is definitely a key topic that more and more people are talking about these days, and I think that very squarely relates on that topic. Don't know if a question has come in, but if not, I actually have another one for you that's very similar or on point here. One of the things I hear is this idea of salespeople sometimes telling the marketing team, "I don't want you to touch an opportunity that I have open." And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how that is same or different when it's a recovery lead. Does the sales team care as much that marketing is going to be communicating with that lost opportunity? Or does sales want to own that end to end, right? They want to own when to reach out again, how to reach out again.
Yeah, I think it's every organization is so vastly different. Specifically for software companies, their sales cycles can and can't, be so long, where their emphasis is more on the short-term value, versus marketing's performance. And so typically I'd see, if you have a larger deal, larger opportunity, then that's a prospect that you create cadences for, or you set activities for, because it just takes longer to close. And so for opportunities that might not be so ready or so interesting, then those leads are usually flagged or unfortunately not followed up with. And so it's kind of, it's hard as a human, right, to not have bias, really when it comes to treating every lead the same. And that kind of goes back to the lead management process, which is another hot topic, was, not lead generation. It might not be a lead generation problem, but a lead management problem. And so companies, have influxes of leads, from their marketing teams, but they're seeing that there's a lot of disconnect between that leaky funnel, that leaky pipeline, and leads leaking out at various stages. And so marketing just then pours more on the top. And so it becomes like this kind of progressive situation where it's really kind of a revolving door. No one really knows what the issue is and where the problems lie. But yeah, it's really just about, for sales specifically, to manage expectations, with marketing and closing the loop as best as possible. And obviously it just depends on the sales organization and how they're structured as to what their performance numbers look like and their performance benchmarks. And their leadership team has a big impact on how leads are managed. And so I've seen organizations, where leads are not properly managed, and that's usually the problem is leadership, not the sales reps or not the sales development team. It's a leadership issue.
Yeah, great points.
Let me see if there's, yep. So I don't see any questions here, but yeah, so I hope that we actually got some good feedback or I did at least, from some other folks in our team about some tactics here. And I think this is all very great stuff. And so we'll definitely share this recorded webinar with you all. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Rod, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure. It was fun. I enjoyed talking about these challenges in the industry. So I hope we get a chance to do this again. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, they can reach me at rod@listenloop.com, and happy to have a follow-up conversation. Yep,
awesome. And I'll also make sure to send our emails with the recording as well, just to make sure we're both in contact with anyone. So thanks so much, guys.